Welcome back to your spiritual Ramadan companion, Salam Media. I hope you are comfortable, you are resting in this beautiful, beautiful Human Rights Day holiday here in South Africa. And if you are listening to us from any part of the world, you're also welcomed. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Johannesburg. And it's always a pleasure to have you join us here on News and Views, your home of humanitarian journalism. We're going to be having our special hashtag Palestine Media Resistance segment, where we're going to be delving into the pivotal role of media in the ongoing genocide against the people of Gaza and the struggles faced by journalists reporting under extreme conditions and social media and combating, the other side, the narratives and the propaganda that we see stemming from supporters of the Israeli genocidal machine and some of their proxies. And we're going to be having an interesting one today. The Royal Television Society (RTS) decided to revoke a special award for Gaza-based journalists, and this stance has sparked a wave of outrage within the media community. Over 400 professionals, including some of the most respected names in the industry and in broadcast journalism, have demanded transparency from RTS and calling for the reinstatement of this recognition. Gaza's journalists have risked their lives to bring the world the brutal realities of the ongoing conflict, and with many paying the ultimate price for their work. And today I'm joined by Ruhi Hamid, an award winning producer and director who has worked extensively in challenging environments and whose own experience shed light on the critical role journalists play in telling untold stories from places of suffering and resistance, particularly at this current moment in Gaza. Ruhi, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you.
I think we can start off with this decision by the RTS to revoke that special award for Gaza journalist. If you can give us some background and insight to some of our audience that might not have an idea of what's happening and what's the latest on the story. Just summarize it a bit for us.
Yeah. So, as you explained, the RTS, which is the Royal Television Society, gives awards every year to outstanding journalism across, all the coverage that the different broadcasters do. And on the night, they have a special award, which is given every year. And that special award, for instance, 2 years ago, was awarded to the journalists of Ukraine. This year, it was deemed that it was going to be given to the journalists of Gaza for all the coverage that they have done in the last 15 months. However, halfway through the ceremony, I was at the ceremony. One of my colleagues got an email because she was the chair explaining that this year that special award would not be given without any explanation, except that they didn't want to fuel the fire of another controversy around another documentary called Gaza Surviving a War Zone, which your viewers might know. Focused on four young people, three children and a 20-something-year-old young woman, and so the RTS just gave that very vague explanation that they would not be awarding it because they didn't want to add fuel to the fire of the ongoing debate around that other documentary. So we were quite shocked because it happened halfway through the ceremony. It was in the program, so as far as we knew, it was going to be awarded. So, as you can imagine, we were shocked and very disappointed at this appalling decision. So yes, so as a consequence, there was a letter written questioning the RTS. It appears to have been given. This decision seems to have been taken without any proper consideration, consultation, or accountability. I mean, there was nothing that we could see. There was no evidence that this was something that had been discussed at length. It was like a last-minute decision. So, as you know, that this letter was written, as you explained, by some really prominent journalists like Jonathan Dimbleby. You may remember he was the person who exposed the famine in Ethiopia. And people like Fergal Keane, who covered South Africa quite considerably. In fact, he covered the Mandela election. So, these very strong, stalwart journalists also were signatories among 400 others, including myself. And we were raising concerns with the RTS about how the decision was made, what due process was followed, why wasn't there any transparency. So we put several questions to them as to how the organization made this really appalling decision.
Mm, mm. Some reports are suggesting that lobbying from groups like the Board of Deputies of British Jews may have influenced the RTS decision. Do you think this is likely? Do you think they succumbed to that kind of political pressure? And how undermining is it to the integrity of the organization and the awards process themselves?
Mm. Look, we can speculate as to where the pressure came from. And all I can say is that when the Gaza documentary went out, the original documentary, we know who those 45 people were, which was, one could say, a pro Israeli Zionist lobby. And we don't know exactly where the pressure came from. And this is some of the questions that we're asking the RTS to explain to us, to give us some transparency as to where that pressure came from. But we can imagine that there are some high powered people in the industry who were against this award being given to the journalists of Gaza. They associate everything to do with Gaza to do with Hamas, and
Mhm,
therefore everything is questioned, scrutinized above and beyond any other war coverage that I can imagine, that I know in my lifetime. I have been around long enough to have seen the struggles in South Africa, seen the
mm,
struggles in Syria, in Afghanistan. I've covered Afghanistan. There's never been this kind of scrutiny over the journalism as there is this time. And this is what we find in the industry quite worrying. It's worrying because journalism is supposed to seek the truth. And in this case, again, I think it's unprecedented that we have to be aware that Western journalists are not allowed into Gaza to report.
mhm,
So we rely on the journalists on the ground, which are the Palestinian journalists on the ground, to give us the news. Every single broadcaster is relying on them. At the awards, what's interesting is that there were three other awards given to some form of Gaza journalist, whether it was an individual journalist or it was ITN won an award, and they commended the fact that they could not have done this without the journalists on the ground. So it's not as if it's not recognized that what the journalists are doing on the ground is impeccable. It's risky. They've risked their lives. They've lost lives. Let's not forget 100 or over 127 journalists in Gaza have lost their lives during these last 15 months. So,
mhm,
we have to question, why is Israel not allowing journalists in to cover,
mm,
to verify? If they are skeptical about the coverage by the Gaza journalists, then let Western journalists in to corroborate these stories, to give more coverage to it. We have to question, why is this not happening? What has Israel got to hide? So for all of us who work in the media, and you know, British media has always been respected, and we want to keep that integrity going because this is our integrity as journalists. It is our industry that's under scrutiny now. And I think it's done a whole load of damage to the Royal Television Society as well as an organization. It's
mhm.
worrying. It's worrying as to what pressure they're falling under.
No, very, very worrying. There's a conversation that's currently being had, particularly here in South Africa, when it comes to media institutions, the ones that are, have been existing for a very, very long time. And the conversation is the institutions that are existing now globally have interests already. They have entrenched interests, and we know who funds them, and we know the narrative that is being pushed. It's just that now they are being correctly challenged. That's why you see, the bias when it comes to the reporting on Palestine, the bias when it comes to the treatment of Palestinian narratives and journalists. Because I don't think in any point of history has the media been challenged to this point. And the argument on that front is, do we continue try to change the narrative that is being peddled in those existing spaces, or do we invest in alternative media platforms? Because the rise of social media has given us that platform. We can do that, even though it has its own restrictions with shadow bannings and all of that. So how do you respond to that? Do we still try to continue with the traditional media outlets who have a narrative, who are now in the defense because of the challenge that is being posed against them, and because of this ongoing genocide? Or it's time now that we find, establish, and support and fund alternatives that are not necessarily going to give us a biased view on Palestine and what's happening there, but give us the truth. And it just so happens that this time around, the truth is there's a genocide against the people of Palestine.
Oops, I've lost you there. Um, I'm sorry, I lost you there for a minute, for the last minute, but I think you raised some really, really important issues. I think talking about bias, let's be honest. We've always known that there's a bias. There's an approach that is taken that is always a certain kind of perspective. But I think what's more worrying is the censorship that's been happening in the last 15 months of the coverage, in particular about Gaza. You know, we have a parallel. We see how Ukraine is covered, and then we see
Mhm,
how Gaza is covered. So there is a difference. It's not that we can't trust these, age-old institutions like the BBC or Channel 4 News, etc. However, what's worrying is that there has been huge amounts of censorship in this case, and in terms of what do we do? Of course, we can set up alternative media routes, and there's lots of alternative platforms these days. So people are not consuming news, simply from the broadcasters. In fact, the worrying thing is that there's less and less relying on mainstream media.
mhm,
But what I would say with mainstream media is, no matter how critical I am of it, the point is that there is strong journalism that does take place where everything has to be corroborated, checked 2 times, 3 times, etc., before it goes out. Social media is powerful. So everyone is consuming news from social media, but there's also a kind of a toxic environment on social media, as we well know. And there's a lot of fake news, there's uncorroborated evidence, etc. So it creates quite a noisy atmosphere. So
mhm,
we have to still rely on well respected, trained journalists to deliver us the truth. And what we have to do is demand that kind of rigor in their reporting. It's as simple as that. It should be rigorous, it should seek the truth, and, deliver the news as they would anywhere else. It's just that there's a difference in the way Gaza is being reported. And that's what's really, in a way, highlighted the hypocrisies. There's hypocrisies, there's censorship. And these are the things that are really worrying. The censorship part of it is really worrying, where people are afraid to report things fully because they're afraid of offending Israel, offending anyone who, may come out and, yes, challenge them on it. So I
mhm,
think institutions like the BBC certainly is running scared. But I think we have to work from within. We have to work from outside, in that we should set up our own platforms, certainly, and apply the rigors of journalism. And there's enough young people out there now who are being trained as good journalists, who see the world for what it is. I don't think they're so easily cowed by this kind of establishment approach to uh, seeking the truth. But also, we have to hold these kind of institutions to account, including the RTS. And that's what we're doing as workers in the media right now, is to hold institutions like this to account. We need to shake them up. I think we need to bring about change in their board of directors. So people like us, myself included, we
mhm,
have to enter these institutions and try and bring about change, try and bring about a different kind of influence of narrative, from people of the global majority. And in Britain, especially, there's lots of people here who can relate to Gaza, can relate to other conflicts in the world that we can shed light on. So I think it's up to us as well to be proactive. We can't leave it to institutions to get it right. I think we have to intervene, and we have to intervene professionally. I think that's the key thing. We just
mhm.
have to be good journalists. It's as simple as that. And all we demand of them is to do the same.
No, I think that's clear. What's the latest now from the RTS? Has there been a response to the letter? What has been the latest engagement with them?
Well, the good news is they have done a U turn, And
Hmm.
so they are going to reinstate this award. And we have put further pressure on them that not only should be reinstated, but it should be given publicly at the next awards. There's a TV awards on Tuesday, the 25th. So that was one of our demands, that they should give it publicly and honorably to the journalists of Gaza so that they rightly get what they deserve, for the incredible hard work they've done over the last 15 months. I mean, you people in South Africa can understand what it's like to be under occupation, under a
Definitely.
system that is an apartheid system where you're a second class citizen. I was very involved in the anti-apartheid movement. And, that was pretty awful. What happened in South Africa was awful. But there's a slight difference in what's happening in Gaza. In South Africa, they still needed Black people to work in the mines as maids, as cleaners, whatever, right?
Hmm.
In Gaza, they are ethnically cleansing the Gaza Strip of Palestinians. And that's what I think is really, really sinister. And then what's happening within the media is draconian. It's almost like McCarthyism. I mean, I'll go as far as in saying it's like McCarthyism, where people are being silenced. So these are incredibly worrying times for our industry, for the media.
Mm, no, definitely. Just before I let you go, Ruhi,
Oops, I've just lost you there. I can't hear you. I don't know if you can hear me. Sorry.
can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you.
Yes, I think we just had a problem with connection there a moment.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to make the point that you made like some sort of a correlation between South Africa and Palestine, and I can tell you for sure that even with us South Africans, it's gotten to a point where we don't feel that comparison is even justified anymore. We feel like what's happening in Palestine is 100 times worse than the apartheid here in South Africa. So yeah, that's very, very important to know that it doesn't feel the same anymore, and it feels
Yeah.
yeah. There's
It's
that's
actually it's really good to hear that from you, because I would almost feel like I was insulting South Africans to say that living under apartheid wasn't terrible, because it
yeah. No,
was.
it
It was
was.
awful, where blacks weren't allowed to move around freely,
Mm,
Bantustans were created. So that was a kind of ethnic cleansing. But
yeah.
actually they were still given homes and given some kind of legitimacy that, oh, you've got your own little country. But
Mm.
this is, I mean, it's
It's a
women and
genocide.
children. It's a genocide.
It's a
And
genocide essentially,
yes.
yes. And apartheid and genocide, both crimes against humanity. And you almost don't want to compare the two, but it feels hard not to. But before I let you go, Rui, just in closing, it almost feels like we are in a new phase of this genocide. You have the likes of Donald Trump now being really involved. He wants to show his strength. He wants to show his influence. And Benjamin Netanyahu is the happiest person in the world right now because of that. From a media point of view, and we've seen how the other side has also been so aggressively trying to push their narrative on the media. How do we adjust to this new reality? How do we try and counteract this newly found strength from this genocide peddling propaganda side that supports this genocide against the people of Gaza and of Palestine?
I think it's simple. We just have to fight, and we have to challenge, and we have to be vigilant of everything that's being reported, write letters, whatever it takes, go on protest, because we can't stay silent. I think inaction is the worst crime. The other day, I was listening to the UN debate, and the Palestinian ambassador was just saying, act now, act now. And I think in all our spheres of life, whether we're journalists, whether we're social workers, whether we work in business and finance, we have to question everything. Where is the finance coming from and going to in terms of Israel? The support that Israel are getting from America. The Americans need to challenge it, and they're rightly doing it. Jewish groups are challenging Americans. So I think on every corner, we just have to fight and challenge, and, as I say, and be vigilant of every single report, because there is, the BBC will always say, oh, we give balance, we give, but actually it's been very clear that the Israelis get a much better coverage than the Palestinians do. When the attack happened, the missile attack happened the other
Mhm.
day, 2 days ago, on the Today program, they went to an Israeli to comment on it. They went to the
Wow.
perpetrator rather than the victim. Where was the Palestinian spokesperson? There's lots of people who can speak on this on behalf of the Palestinians, but the Palestinians themselves. And so often the narrative is skewed towards the Israeli point of view. They're so afraid of upsetting the Israelis because the Israelis have really got their propaganda machine working well, I think.
Mm.
They intervene at every moment. So I think it's up to us to intervene at every moment and challenge and not remain quiet. We cannot be silenced anymore. We have to question this and at every point. That would be my advice to everyone. And I think it's not just the media. The media is obviously the propaganda machine, but
Mm.
everybody on every level should be challenging it. And I'm glad a program like yours is also looking into this, even though it's something that's happened in Britain, because this is a global issue. It concerns all of us. It
No,
concerns our future as how we want our societies to be. And as you said in the beginning of this report, the media plays a massive role in this, a massive role. And so all of us have to remain vigilant and not be silenced.
And I think we're going to leave on that note, Rui. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Palestine Media Resistance with Ruhi Hamid coming to us live from London. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you.
There you go. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, news and views continues after this.